Every scan warned them to stay apart, until their touch shattered every rule. Jace Carver didn't plan on crashing his ship into Klytheron's gritty streets, but that's exactly what happened. He was used to trouble, but nothing could have prepared him for her. An alien warrior with violet eyes and a body that could stop worlds, she pinned him against a wall with a touch that should have killed him. But instead, something electric sparked between them, something no one had ever predicted. As enemies close in and the world around them descends into chaos, Jace's life collides with hers in ways he can't explain. And the deeper they go, the more dangerous the connection becomes. What happens when the rules are broken and their touch turns into something uncontrollable? Curious to see where this sparks will lead? Subscribe now and never miss the next chapter of their story. The sky above Klytheron shimmered like a busted hollow screen, all swirling auroras and jagged streaks of violet and green. Below, the city sprawled across a cracked obsidian plain, a neon-lit beast of a place where towering spires buzzed with electric hums and streets flickered with holographic hawkers peddling glowing junk. The air hit Jace Carver like a slap, burnt metal mixed with a weird, syrupy sweetness that made his nose wrinkle. He'd just pancaked his rust-bucket ship, the Tin Widow, into the city's grimy underbelly, and as he kicked open the cockpit hatch, he couldn't help but laugh. "Well, I've had worse Mondays," he muttered, stumbling out onto the sizzling black ground. His boots crunched against shards of glass, or whatever passed for pavement here, and he wiped a smear of engine grease off his scruffy jaw. Jace was a mess. Late 20s, wiry build, dark hair sticking up like he'd lost a fight with a socket wrench. His flight jacket was patched with duct tape, and his grin screamed trouble. The kind of guy who'd smuggle contraband across 3 systems and still crack a dumb joke about it. He squinted at the wreckage. "Ah, Widow, you deserved better than this." "Me too, probably." The ship's hull groaned, spitting sparks, and Jace sighed. It wasn't just a ride. It was the closest thing he had to a home, a family, and now it was toast. He kicked a twisted panel, muttering, "Guess I'm walking from here." That's when the shadows moved. A figure stepped out from behind a flickering neon sign, shaped like a 3-eyed fish. Jace blinked, brain short-circuiting as he took her in. She was tall, over 6 feet, easy, with skin that shifted between deep purple and stark white, smooth as polished stone. Silver hair flowed down her back like liquid steel, catching the city's glow, and her pointed ears twitched at the sound of his voice. Her armor was minimal, hugging a body that could have stopped wars or started them. Sharp hips, full chest, legs that went on forever. Violet eyes locked onto him, cold and piercing, like she was sizing up a snack. Jace said, eloquence abandoning him. "Hi." She moved fast, too fast. 1 second she was 10 feet away, the next she had him slammed against a buzzing wall, claws digging into his wrists. Her thigh pressed hard against his chest, pinning him like a bug. Up close, she smelled like ozone and something floral, and her grip was iron. Jace's breath hitched, a jolt of heat ripping through him where her skin brushed his. It wasn't pain, more like a live wire dancing under his flesh, wild and confusing. "State your purpose, human," she hissed, voice low and melodic, cutting through the hum of the city. Her claws tightened, pricking his skin through his jacket. Jace grinned, because of course he did. "Purpose? Mostly crashing and not dying." "You're, really good at this pinning thing, though. Practice much." His heart pounded, half from fear, half from whatever the hell her touch was doing to him. Every scanner on his ship had screamed that humans and Zyrathians, assuming that's what she was, couldn't touch without melting into goo. Yet here he was, very not goo, and very aware of her curves pressing into him. Her eyes narrowed, violet slits of suspicion. "You trespass on Klytheron. You bring war." "War? Nah, I bring bad luck and worse pickup lines." He shifted, testing her grip, and winced as her claws dug deeper. "Name's Jace. You got one, or should I call you Captain Stabby?" She didn't flinch. "I am Veyra, enforcer of the Zyrathian Accord. You are an invader." "Invader? Lady, I'm a delivery guy who took a wrong turn at Screwed." His grin faltered as her knee slid higher, dangerously close to crushing something vital. Okay, let's talk this out. I'm not here to, what's that noise? A low whine cut through the air, sharp and mechanical. Veyra's ears flicked, and she yanked her head toward the sound. Jace followed her gaze. 3 sleek drones, all edges and glowing red eyes, zipped out from the neon haze, hovering like pissed-off wasps. Zarathian tech, probably, and definitely not here to chat. Friends of yours? Jace asked, voice pitching up. They hunt you, Veyra snapped, releasing him so fast he stumbled. She drew a blade from her hip, curved, humming with energy, and squared her shoulders. Move, human or die. Jace scrambled to his feet, adrenaline spiking. Move where? I don't even know where oh crap. A drone fired, a bolt of plasma sizzling past his head and melting a chunk of wall. He ducked, yelping, I take it back, this is my worst Monday. Veyra lunged, slashing a drone in half with a single, graceful arc. Sparks showered the street, and Jace couldn't help but stare. Her movements were lethal poetry, all power and precision. Another drone swung toward him, and he dove behind a pile of scrap, heart hammering. Okay, think, Jace. You've got no ship, no gun, and a hot alien who wants you dead. Great start. He peeked out, spotting Veyra dodge a blast, her armor glinting as she spun. Their eyes met for a split second, and something weird passed between them. Not just tension, but a flicker of, what? Curiosity? Before he could figure it out, the third drone zeroed in on her, and instinct kicked in. Hey, ugly, Jace shouted, chucking a hunk of metal at it. The drone wobbled, distracted, and Veyra finished it with a thrust that sent it crashing in a burst of static. She whirled on him, blade raised, and for a moment he thought she'd skewer him anyway. You are foolish, she said, lowering the weapon an inch. Her chest heaved, sweat beading on her purple-white skin, and Jace swallowed hard, trying not to notice how it glistened. Yeah, well, foolish keeps me alive. He stood, brushing off his jacket like he hadn't just nearly peed himself. So, truce? You don't kill me. I don't, annoy you to death. She stared, unblinking, then sheathed her blade. You're no warrior. Why are you here? Long story. Short version. I smuggle stuff, clients stiff me, ship went boom. Now I'm here, and you're... He gestured vaguely at her. You. All that. Veyra's lips twitched. Almost a smirk, but not quite. You're a liability. And you're a delight. We're a match made in... Wait, what's that? He pointed past her. Lights flared in the distance. More drones, or worse, cutting through the neon glow. The city's hum grew louder, like it was waking up to spit them out. Veyra grabbed his arm, claws grazing his skin, and that jolt hit again, sharper this time, racing up his spine. He gasped, and she froze, her grip tightening for a heartbeat before she shoved him forward. Run, human. Now. Run? Oh, I'm great at running. Jace bolted after her, boots pounding the mirrored street as the lights closed in. His mind raced. Why wasn't he dead from her touch? Why'd it feel so damn good? And why, despite the chaos, did he kind of hope she'd grab him again? They darted into a narrow alley, neon signs flickering overhead, casting wild shadows across Veyra's form. She moved like a predator, all grace and fury, while Jace flailed behind, muttering, If I survive this, I'm writing a strongly worded complaint to the universe. The drone's whine echoed closer, and Veyra shot him a look, half warning, half something he couldn't read. He grinned back, because what else could he do? The alley twisted ahead, lined with glowing pipes that spat steam into the air. Jace tripped over a coil, catching himself on the wall, and Veyra's hand shot out to steady him. Her fingers brushed his, and the spark flared again, hot and fleeting. She yanked back, muttering something in her language, and Jace rubbed his hand, pulse thudding. Gotta say, he panted, your welcoming committee sucks. She didn't reply, just kept moving, and he followed, the city's electric pulse matching the one buzzing under his skin. Jace's boots slapped against the mirrored floor of the static vaults, each step echoing like a gunshot in the underground labyrinth. The air down here was thick, crackling with static that stung his lungs and tasted sharp like licking a battery. Conduits lined the walls, humming with blue energy that danced across the reflective surfaces, turning the place into a funhouse of light and shadow. He darted after Veyra, her silver hair flashing ahead like a beacon, and try not to think about how close those drones, or whatever was chasing them, might be. Next time I crash on a planet, he panted, dodging a sparking pipe. Remind me to pick one with less murder-y vibes. Veyra didn't slow, her long legs eating up the distance with predatory grace. Keep moving, human, or I'll leave you for them. Her voice was ice, but there was a bite to it, like she half meant it, half didn't. Jace couldn't tell, and that thrilled him more than it should have. They rounded a corner into a wider chamber, the ceiling studded with glowing conduits that pulsed like veins. The whine of the drones faded, swallowed by the vault's hum, and Veyra stopped, her violet eyes scanning the shadows. Jace skidded to a halt beside her, chest heaving, and wiped sweat from his brow. So, we safe yet? Or is this the part where you stab me for fun? She shot him a look, sharp, annoyed, but her lips twitched again, that almost smirk he was starting to chase. You talk too much. Yeah, it's a gift. He grinned, leaning against a conduit that zapped his elbow. He yelped, shaking his arm. Ow! Okay, this place hates me too. Perfect. Veyra stepped closer, inspecting a flickering panel on the wall. Her armor hugged her curves tighter in the blue light, and Jace's eyes snagged on the way it clung to her hips, her thighs. Damn, she was a walking weapon in every sense. He caught himself staring and coughed, looking away. So what's the plan, Captain Stabby? Hide here till they forget my charming face. They hunt you, she said, tapping the panel with a claw. It hissed open, revealing a tangle of wires and a dead drone slumped inside. But not just for your crash. You carry something they want. Jace blinked. Me? I've got nothing but bad debts and a knack for pissing people off. You sure they're not after you? You're the one with the hole. He waved at her. Killer vibe going on. She yanked the drone out, its metal shell clattering to the floor, and crouched to examine it. This is Zyrathian, but altered. Someone else controls it. Her claws traced its circuits, and Jace crouched beside her, close enough to feel the heat rolling off her skin. That floral ozone scent hit him again, messing with his head. Altered, huh? Let me see. He pulled a chewed-up multi-tool from his jacket, his one reliable friend, and poked at the drone's guts. Looks like someone spliced in a remote signal. Not my style, but I've seen worse hacks in a bar brawl. Veyra's hand brushed his as she pointed to a chip, and the jolt hit. Hotter this time, like a spark igniting gasoline in his veins. His breath caught, fingers twitching against hers, and she froze too, her violet eyes flicking to his. For a heartbeat, they just stared, the air between them buzzing louder than the vaults. Jace managed, voice hoarse. That's not normal, right? No, she said, pulling back fast, but her voice wavered. Just a crack, enough to make his pulse jump. It should kill us. Should, but didn't. He rubbed his hand, still feeling her touch like a phantom burn. I'm starting to think your science sucks. She stood, glaring down at him, but the tension lingered, thick and unspoken. Focus, human. We need to. A screech cut her off, metal grinding metal. A conduit hatch 10 feet away burst open, and a drone whirred out, red eyes locking onto them. Jace scrambled up, grabbing the dead drone's shell. Round 2, huh? Fine, I'm game. Veyra's blade was out in a flash, but the drone darted high, firing a bolt that scorched the floor where she'd stood. She rolled, all fluid power, and Jace chucked the shell at it, shouting, "Catch, you tin bastard!" The drone wobbled, distracted, and Veyra leaped, slashing it clean through. It crashed in a shower of sparks, and she landed, panting, her silver hair wild. Nice teamwork, Jace said, grinning despite the adrenaline shaking his hands. We should start a band. She ignored him, kicking the wreckage, but her ears flicked, a tell, maybe, that she wasn't as cold as she played. Then the chamber shuddered, a low rumble rolling through the vaults. More drones? Worse. Yatsisku twisted. We can't stay here, Veyra said, scanning the exits. They'll flood this place. Great, love a challenge. He nodded at a narrow conduit tunnel, barely wide enough for one. That way. She hesitated, then moved for it. Stay close. And silent. Silence not my forte, he muttered, following her. The tunnel was tight, walls pulsing with energy that singed his jacket. Veyra slid in first, her body a shadow of curves ahead, and Jace squeezed after, the space forcing them closer than he'd planned. Halfway through, a conduit sparked, and the tunnel jolted, slamming them together. Her back crashed into his chest, her hips grinding against his as they wedged in the nook. Jace's hands shot out, gripping her waist to steady them, and her armor pressed into him. Hard, smooth, hot. Her claws dug into his arms, not breaking skin but pinning him there, and her breath hitched, hot against his neck. The energy surged between them, a wildfire racing through his nerves, sharp and dizzying, pooling low in his gut. He could feel every inch of her thighs locking against his, her curves molding into him. And it was too much, too fast. Move, she growled, but her voice was ragged, and she didn't shove him off. Her silver hair brushed his jaw, soft and electric, and Jace's fingers tightened on her waist, sliding just under the edge of her armor, brushing bare skin. It was smooth, fever-warm, and the spark flared brighter, a pulse that made his head spin. Trying, he rasped, throat dry, every nerve screaming to press closer. You're distracting. She twisted, her face inches from his, violet eyes blazing. You are impossible. But her claws lingered, digging deeper, and for a second, he swore she leaned into him. Then she shoved free, leaving him gasping in the dark. Jace stumbled after her, heart hammering, the taste of her heat still on his skin. They emerged into a wider tunnel, the hum quieter here, but the air felt heavier, like the vaults were holding their breath. Veyra crouched by the dead drone she dragged along, slicing into its core with a blade. A hollow chip flickered to life, projecting a grainy image, a gray-skinned figure, tall and gaunt, issuing commands in a guttural tongue. Velections, Veyra spat, her ridge-patterned neck tensing. They've tampered with our systems. Valhunau. Jace squinted at the image. They look like discount vampires. What's their deal? They divide, she said, standing blade still in hand. They've lied about our kind, yours and mine. Made us enemies. Jace laughed, sharp and bitter. So, I'm a lab rat and a fugitive? Multitasking's my specialty. He grabbed his multi-tool, twirling it. Let's fry this thing, send him a message. She nodded, a rare flicker of approval in her eyes. And Jace set to work, hot-wiring the drone signal. It sparked, then beeped, a tiny victory. There, decoy's live. Should buy us a minute. Good, Veyra said, stepping past him, her arm brushing his chest. The jolt was softer this time, but it still hit. Warm, insistent, tugging at something deep. She didn't look back, just kept moving, and Jace followed, muttering, "Minute's all I need to figure out why you're stuck in my head." The tunnel stretched ahead, conduits flickering like they were laughing at him. Somewhere above, the city growled, and Jace gripped his tool tighter, Veyra's shadow pulling him forward. The tunnel spat Jace and Veyra out into the shard wastes, a jagged hellscape of black glass stretching beyond Klytheron's neon glow. Shattered skyscrapers loomed like broken teeth, frozen mid-collapse under a sky burning red with twin suns. The wind howled through the ruins, sharp and bitter, carrying the tang of scorched earth and something sour that made Jace's throat itch. He stumbled onto the obsidian ground, the decoy drone's beep fading behind them, and sucked in a ragged breath. "Remind me," he wheezed, brushing dust off his jacket, "why I didn't crash on a beach planet with cocktails instead?" Veyra didn't answer, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. Her silver hair whipped in the wind, catching the crimson light, and her purple-white skin gleamed with a thin sheen of sweat. She moved ahead, blade in hand, every step a coiled promise of violence. Jace trailed her, his multi-tool dangling from his belt, and tried to ignore how her armor hugged her hips, tight, distracting, dangerous. "Those Valesian creeps," he said, kicking a glass shard that skittered across the ground. "Messing with your tech, lying about us being poison to each other. What's our endgame? Galactic HOA fees." "They divide to conquer," Veyra replied, voice low and edged with fury. "They've poisoned my people's trust. Yours too, likely." She stopped, crouching to inspect a faint trail of scratches in the glass. "We're not safe here." "Safe? I haven't been safe since I met you." He grinned, but it faltered as a shadow flickered between the ruins. Tell me that's just the wind." Her ears twitched, and she straightened, blade humming. "It's not." The air split with a screech, high-pitched, mechanical, wrong. 3 Valections emerged from the wreckage, gray-skinned and gaunt, their eyes glowing sickly yellow. They wielded jagged blades that pulsed with energy, and their movements were jerky, like puppets on frayed strings. Jace's gut clenched. "Discount vampires, 12 o'clock," he shouted, scrambling for cover behind a slab of glass. "Any chance they're here to negotiate?" Veyra lunged, a blur of silver and purple, her blade clashing against the first Valection's weapon in a shower of sparks. She danced through the fight, swift, lethal, every swing a masterpiece of precision. Jace peeked out, heart pounding, and grabbed a rusted pipe from the rubble. "Okay, Jace, time to not die. You've got this." He charged, swinging the pipe like a lunatic. "Die, you great bastards." It connected with the Valection's arm, sending it staggering, and Veyra finished it with a slash that split its chest open. Black ichor splattered the glass, and she spun toward the next, her breath sharp and fast. The 3rd Valesian swung at Jace, its blade grazing his jacket. He yelped, diving aside, and Veyra caught its arm mid-strike, twisting it back with a crack. Their eyes met, hers blazing his wide, and she nodded a silent keep up. He swung again, pipe denting the Valection's skull, as she drove her blade through its neck. It crumpled, twitching, and the wastes fell silent except for their ragged breathing. Jace dropped the pipe, hands shaking. "Teamwork makes the dream work, huh?" He wiped ichor off his sleeve, grinning despite the adrenaline crash. "You're scary good at that." Veyra sheathed her blade, stepping over the corpse. "You're reckless." But her tone softened, just a hair, and she grabbed his arm to steady him as he wobbled. Her claws brushed his skin, and the jolt hit, stronger now, a hot pulse that raced up his arm and lodged in his chest. He gasped, and she held on a second longer, her grip firm. "Yeah, well, reckless keeps me." He stopped, words dying as her touch lingered. The air thickened, their pulses sinking, and he couldn't look away from her violet eyes. Then the ground shook, a low, guttural rumble. Veyra released him, whirling toward the sound. "More come." "Great," Jace muttered, flexing his hand where her touch still burned. Round 3. She didn't reply, just moved toward a towering shard of glass, its surface cracked but reflective. Jace followed, adrenaline spiking again as shadows shifted in the distance. More Valections, closing fast. They ducked behind the shard, and Veyra pressed against it, her body tense. Jace crouched beside her, too close, their shoulders brushing. The spark flared, softer this time, but still made his breath hitch. "Stay low," she whispered, her voice a blade's edge. "They'll pass." "Yeah, sure, I'm a stealth master," he whispered back, sarcasm dripping. But he stayed put, watching her profile, sharp jaw, silver hair clinging to her neck with sweat. The Valection's footsteps crunched closer, and Jace's hand brushed hers by accident, fingers sliding over her knuckles. The jolt hit again, warm and insistent, and she stiffened, claws twitching. "Sorry," he mouthed, but he didn't pull back. Neither did she. The footsteps faded, and Veyra exhaled, standing fast. "They're gone. For now." Jace rose, wiping his palms on his pants. "Good. I'm running out of witty death threats." He kicked a Valesian corpse, and something clattered free, a small device blinking red. "What's this?" Veyra snatched it, her claws clicking against its shell. She pried it open, revealing a hollow chip that flickered to life, an image of Klytheron's power grid, overlaid with Valesian runes. They've rigged the city's core, she said, voice tight, amplifying the lie, making us seem incompatible. Jace stared, anger flaring. They mess with my turf too? That's personal now. He cracked his knuckles, grinning. Let's break their toys. She nodded, but before they could move, a Valesian twitched, still alive. It lunged, blade arcing toward Veyra. Jace shouted, tackling her out of the way, and they hit the ground hard, rolling across the glass. She landed atop him, straddling his hips, her claws digging into his chest through his torn jacket. The air exploded with heat, her thighs clamped tight around him, her weight pressing down, her breath hot and fast against his face. His hands gripped her waist, sliding up the curve of her hips, fingers brushing bare skin where armor gapped. The energy surged, a wildfire tearing through him, sharp and primal, pooling low and dangerous. Get off, she snarled, but her voice cracked, and her claws raked his chest, tearing fabric, leaving red lines that stung. Her lips hovered inches from his, violet eyes wild, and for a second, he thought she'd close the gap, thought he'd let her. Yeah, working on it, he rasped, throat dry, every nerve screaming to pull her closer. Her hips shifted, grinding harder, and the spark flared brighter, a pulse that made his head spin. Then a distant screech broke the spell, the dying Valesian's last cry, and she shoved off, leaving him sprawled, panting, blood pounding in his ears. Move, she snapped, standing, but her hands trembled as she adjusted her armor. Jace staggered up, shirt shredded, chest stinging where her claws had marked him. Next time, he muttered, voice hoarse, warn me before you climb me like that. She glared, but her ears flicked, and she turned away fast, blade out again. Jace followed, rubbing his chest. The heat of her still seared into his skin. The Valesian device blinked in her hand as they trudged toward a collapsed spire, its shadow stretching long and jagged across the wastes. The wind kicked up, howling through the ruins, and Jace squinted at the horizon. More shapes moving, faint but closing in. Think they brought friends? He asked, twirling his multi-tool like it'd save him. Veyra's grip tightened on her blade. Likely. Fantastic. He jogged to keep pace, the glass crunching underfoot, and fished a shard from the rubble. A makeshift shield, maybe. Guess we're improvising. She glanced at him, a flicker of something, respect, in her eyes, and kept moving, the red sky bleeding darker overhead. The wind screamed louder as Jace and Veyra climbed out of the shard wastes, the obsidian ground giving way to the ion spires, a cluster of towering metal pillars spiking up from Klytheron's plateau. Lightning cracked across the violet sky, slamming into the spires with bursts of white fire that made the air taste like burnt copper. The ground vibrated under Jace's boots, a low thrum that rattled his teeth, and he clutched the glass shard tighter, its edge biting into his palm. Next vacation, he muttered, squinting against the electric haze, I'm picking a planet with less zap and more naps. Veyra moved ahead, her silver hair whipping wild in the storm, her blade catching flickers of light. The Valesian device blinked in her other hand, its red glow a taunt against the chaos. She glanced back, violet eyes sharp. Keep up, human. The grid's close. Yeah, I'm on it. Jace jogged after her, his torn jacket flapping, the claw marks on his chest stinging with every step. Her touch still lingered, a ghost of heat under his skin, and he shook his head, trying to focus. So we smashed their toy, save the day, get a parade, right? She didn't answer, just pointed to a spire pulsing brighter than the rest, its base ringed with conduits snaking into the rock. There, the core's hub. Before he could crack another joke, a voice hit him, not in his ears but inside his skull. Stay close, human. Clear, melodic, pissed. Veyra's voice. He stumbled, nearly dropping the shard. Whoa, what the hell? She froze mid-step, ears twitching, and spun on him. You heard that. Loud and clear, Captain Stabby. He tapped his temple, grinning despite the weirdness. You moonlighting as a psychic now. Her eyes widened, a rare crack in her armor. No, it's us. She stepped closer, claws flexing. The connection, It's growing. Jace's grin faltered as her thoughts brushed his again. Cool, precise, like a blade sliding through his mind. They've rigged the storm. Then his own voice echoed back, unfiltered. Her thighs could crush me, and I'd thank her. He choked, face burning. Oh crap, you heard that. Veyra's lips twitched, almost a smirk, but her gaze darkened. Focus. They're here. Thunder roared, and the spires lit up. Velections swarming from the shadows, gray skin glinting wet in the storm. Their blades hummed louder now, synced to the lightning, and the air thickened as the storm intensified. Jace ducked behind a pillar, heart slamming. Guess they brought the whole creepy family. Veyra charged, a silver streak against the chaos, her blade clashing with the Velections in a burst of sparks. Jace gripped his shard, mind racing. Her thoughts hit him again, left flank, now, and he moved without thinking, swinging the glass into Velection's side. It staggered, and she finished it, their rhythm uncanny, like they'd fought together for years. Mind meld teamwork, he shouted, dodging a bolt that scorched the ground. We're unstoppable. Don't get cocky, she snapped, but her voice echoed in his head too. He's reckless, but useful. A flicker of warmth slipped through, and Jace grinned wider. Then the storm surged, lightning slamming the spires in a chain reaction, conduits exploding in showers of blue fire. The Velections retreated, but the hub pulsed faster, its hum deafening. Veyra grabbed the device, sprinting for it, and Jace followed, the air crackling around them. A bolt struck near, shattering a pillar, and the ground buckled, sending them tumbling toward a jagged ledge. Veyra's hand shot out, claws snagging Jace's arm, yanking him back from the drop. He crashed into her, chest slamming against her back, as she twisted, pulling him up. Her thighs locked around his hips as she hauled him to safety, straddling him against the spire's base. Her claws dug into his shoulders, raking through fabric, and his hands slid down her sides, pressing into the curve of her waist where armor met skin. The storm soaked them. Her silver hair plastered to her neck, water slicking her purple-white skin, and the energy exploded between them, a torrent of heat and static that drowned out the thunder. Her breath hitched, hot against his jaw, and Jace's fingers tightened, sliding lower, brushing the swell of her hips. Her body pressed harder, curves grinding into him, wet and firm, and the pulse raced sharp, electric, coiling tight in his gut. Her lips parted, inches from his, rain dripping between them, and he felt her in his head, too close, too much, but her claws stayed, digging deeper, pinning him there. He rasped, voice wrecked. You okay up there? Get up, she growled, but it came out shaky, and her thighs flexed, squeezing him harder. The spark flared brighter, a live wire snapping through his nerves, and for a heartbeat, he swore she'd kiss him, swore he'd let her devour him right there. Then lightning cracked overhead, and she shoved off, staggering to her feet, leaving him sprawled, soaked and gasping. Jace rolled upright, head spinning, the taste of her heat still burning. Yeah, noted, he muttered, rubbing his shoulders where her claws had marked him red. Veyra turned away, clutching the device, but her ears flicked, betraying her. The hub, she said, voice tight. We need to. A shadow loomed. Zyrathian, not Valesian, stepping from the storm. Tall, silver-skinned like her, but his eyes were cold, calculating. Veyra, he said, blade raised. You've gone too far. She tensed, gripping her weapon. Kale, you serve them now. They're right, Kale snarled. Humans are poison. You're proof, tainted by him. He lunged, and Veyra met him, blades clashing in a blur. Jace scrambled up, shard in hand, but a bolt struck Kale's arm, arcing to Veyra. She stumbled, and Kale's blade slashed her side, drawing a thin line of violet blood. No! Jace roared, charging. Kale turned. Too late, Jace slammed the shard into his chest, cracking armor, and Veyra finished it, driving her blade through his gut. Kale crumpled, rain washing his blood into the cracks, and she fell to one knee, clutching her side. Jace dropped beside her, hands hovering. Hey, you're okay, right? Her thoughts hit him, pain, betrayal, him, raw and jagged, and he grabbed her arm, steadying her. The jolt was softer, warm, grounding them both. Fool, she muttered, but her hand gripped his, claws pricking his skin. I'll live. Good, 'cause I'm not hauling your ass out of here alone. He tore a strip from his jacket, pressing it to her wound. Her breath hitched, and she leaned into him, just for a second, her weight a quiet plea. The hub pulsed louder, lightning slamming the spires in rhythm. Jace pulled his multi-tool, grinning through the pain. Time to fry their grid. She nodded, standing with his help, and he jammed the tool into a conduit, sparks flying. Her hand brushed his back. Accidental, maybe, and the connection flared again, sharp and alive. Careful, she said, in his head and out loud. Always, he lied, twisting wires as the storm raged on. The hub flickered, unstable, and Veyra's blade gleamed beside him, ready for whatever came next. The storm chased Jace and Veyra down from the ion spires, lightning clawing at their heels as they stumbled into the shadow of the Lumine core. The Valesian citadel towered over Klytheron's heart, its walls shimmering with stolen energy, veins of neon blue pulsing through the metal like a living thing. The air buzzed thick and heavy, electric haze stinging Jace's eyes, and he coughed, gripping his multi-tool like it could fend off the chaos. If we die here, he rasped, wiping sweat from his brow, I'm haunting you first. Fair warning. Veyra shot him a look, half glare, half smirk, her silver hair plastered to her neck from the rain. The makeshift bandage on her side was soaked violet, but she moved steady, blade in one hand, the hacked Valesian device in the other. Focus, human. The summit's inside. Yeah, crash their party, save the galaxy. He grinned, but it wobbled. Her pain echoed in his head, faint but sharp, a thread of their bond tugging at him. She's hurt. She's mine. His own thought, loud and unbidden, made his chest tighten. They slipped into the citadel through a maintenance hatch, the storm's roar dulling to a hum behind reinforced walls. Inside, the corridors glowed with a sickly sheen, conduits snaking overhead, and voices drifted, cold, clipped, Valesian. Jace's mind brushed Veyra's, left now, and they moved as one, ducking into a shadow as gray-skinned guards passed, their blades humming low. Mind meld's handy, he whispered, twirling his tool. We should start a circus act, Jace and Stabby, the sync sensations. Silent, she hissed, but her thoughts slipped through. He's absurd. I like it. Jace choked on a laugh, and she elbowed him, claws grazing his ribs. The jolt hit, quick, warm, a spark that lingered, and he bit his lip to stay quiet. They crept deeper, the air growing hotter, thicker, until they reached a balcony overlooking the summit chamber. Below, Valexian stood in a circle, gray faces smug, addressing a hollow feed of human and Zyrathian delegates. Puppets on strings. Escalate the divide, one droned, voice like gravel. Their incompatibility ensures our harvest. Jace clenched his fists. Harvest? What are we, cosmic corn? Veyra's eyes narrowed, her thoughts a blade in his mind. They'd die for this. She pulled a stolen guard cloak over her armor, dulling her purple-white skin, and tossed Jace another. Disguise. We strike when they broadcast. He tugged the cloak on, grinning. Stealth mode activated. I look good, right? She ignored him, but her glance lingered, a flicker of heat, and they descended a stairwell, their steps sinking without a word. The chamber buzzed with energy, the broadcast hub glowing at its center, a tangle of wires and screens. Guards patrolled, and Jace's heart pounded, their bond humming louder, sharper, like a live wire between them. Halfway to the hub, a conduit sparked, and a guard turned. Veyra grabbed Jace, shoving him into a power relay nook, her body slamming against his to shield them. Her chest pressed into his, armor digging into his ribs, and her claws sank into his shoulders, pinning him to the wall. The heat hit hard, her thighs sliding against his hips, her breath searing his neck, and his hands gripped her waist, fingers digging into the gap where her cloak parted, brushing bare skin. It was slick with sweat, fever hot, and the energy surged a storm of its own, coiling tight and wild in his core. "Quiet," she breathed, lips grazing his ear, and the vibration shot through him, sharp and dizzying. Her hips rocked forward, pressing harder, and Jace's fingers slid up her sides, tracing the curve under her armor. The spark flared, electric, primal, a pulse that made his head spin, and her claws tightened, raking his shoulders through the cloak, leaving fire in their wake. "Trying," he whispered, voice wrecked, every nerve screaming to pull her closer. Her silver hair brushed his jaw, soft and charged, and he felt her in his head. Too much, too good. But she didn't move, her body locked against his, trembling just enough to betray her. The guard passed, oblivious, and Veyra eased back, but her hands lingered, claws pricking his skin. Jace exhaled, shaky, the taste of her still burning. "You're gonna kill me one way or another," he muttered, rubbing his shoulders where red welts bloomed. "Move," she said, voice rough, and slipped out, leaving him to stumble after, pulse racing. They reached the hub, crouching behind a console as the Valesian leader, a tall bastard with eyes like dead stars, activated the broadcast. "The war must grow," it intoned, and Jace's gut twisted. "Now," Veyra thought, and they sprang up, her blade slashing a guard's throat, his tool jamming into the console's wires. Sparks flew, and he grinned, shouting, "Humans don't roll over, assholes." The screens flickered, hijacked, and Veyra synced the device, her thoughts guiding his. Faster here, until the Valesian lies spilled out. Rigged grids, fake incompatibilities, centuries of deceit. Guards swarmed, blades flashing, and Jace ducked a swing, shard in hand. Veyra fought like a hurricane, silver hair wild, blood streaking her side, and their bond flared, sinking every move. He blocked a strike meant for her, glass cracking, and she spun, gutting the attacker. "Nice save," she said out loud and in his head, and he laughed, breathless. "Teamwork, baby." The Valesian leader roared, lunging with a plasma blade, and Veyra met it, sparks raining. But a second guard fired, a bolt slamming her chest, throwing her back. She hit the ground, cloak smoking, and Jace's world stopped. "Veyra!" he screamed, diving for her, the bond flickering, paying him stay, raw and desperate. He slid beside her, hands shaking as he tore the cloak off. Her armor was scorched, violet blood seeping, but her eyes found his, fierce even through the haze. "I'm here," she rasped, claws clutching his arm, and the jolt hit, weak but alive, grounding him. "Damn right you are," he said, voice breaking, hauling her up. Her weight sagged against him, her side pressing into his, and he held tight, their pulses struggling to sync. "You're my home. You hear me? Stay with me." She squeezed his arm, claws pricking, and nodded, faint but firm. The hub sparked behind them, broadcast still running, Valesians shouting in chaos. Jace grabbed his tool, slamming it into the console again, and the screens flared brighter, truths bleeding out for all to see. "Keep going," Veyra whispered, her thoughts a lifeline. "For us." And he nodded, dragging her toward a side passage as guards closed in. Her blade clattered, too heavy now, and he scooped it up, its hum unfamiliar but steady in his grip. The corridor loomed ahead, dark and narrow, and Jace half carried her, her arm slung over his shoulder, their bond pulsing faint but unbroken. Jace half dragged, half carried Veyra through the Lumine Core's dark corridor, her arm slung over his shoulder, her weight pressing into him with every staggered step. The Citadel groaned behind them, conduits sparking as the broadcast looped. Valesian lies laid bare for the galaxy to hear. Her blade hummed in his free hand, heavier than he'd expected, and her violet blood soaked his torn jacket, warm and sticky against his side. Her thoughts flickered in his mind, paying him forward, faint but fierce, tethering them together. "Stay with me, Stabby," he muttered, voice raw, kicking open a rusted hatch. "We're not dying in this neon dumpster." Her claws dug into his shoulder, a weak grip that still sparked heat through him, and she rasped, "Fool! I'm not done." Her silver hair clung to her face, wet with sweat and rain, and her violet eyes burned, defiant even as her breath hitched. The hatch led to a hangar, where a sleek Zarathian shuttle sat unattended, its hull glinting under flickering lights. Guards shouted in the distance, boots pounding, and Jace hauled her faster, adrenaline screaming through his veins. Jackpot! Time to borrow a ride. He propped her against the shuttle's side, her body sagging, and pried the hatch with his multi-tool, sparks flying as wires hissed. Her hand grabbed his wrist, claws pricking, energy jolting, and her thought hit him. Hurry. Yeah, I'm the king of hot wiring, he said, grinning despite the panic clawing his chest. The hatch popped open, and he lifted her in, her curves sliding against him as he settled her into the co-pilot's seat. Her head lolled, but her claws stayed on his arm, grounding them both. He strapped in, punching controls, and the shuttle roared to life, blasting out of the hangar as plasma bolts scorched the air behind them. The Citadel shrank in the rear screen, its glow swallowed by Klytheron's storm. Jace gripped the yoke, glancing at Veyra. "You good? No passing out on me." She nodded, slow, her thoughts a whisper. "For you I fight." His throat tightened, and he pushed the shuttle harder, the sky splitting open as they broke atmosphere. The broadcast had done its job. Holofeeds showed human ships turning on Valesian outposts, Zyrathian fleets joining the fray. The liars were running, their empire cracking, but Jace didn't care about that. He cared about her breathing beside him. Hours blurred, the shuttles hummed steady, until a new planet loomed, Vantera, a crystalline haven of mirrored plains and soft violet skies. Jace landed hard, the craft skidding across glassy ground, and cut the engines, exhaustion slamming him. Veyra stirred, her hand finding his, claws tracing his knuckles. The spark flared, soft, alive, and he squeezed back. "New digs," he said, voice hoarse. "No neon, no death traps. Think we earned it." She managed a faint smirk. "You talk too much." "Always." He unstrapped, helping her out, and they stepped onto Vantara's surface. The air was cool, sweet, the plains reflecting twin moons like liquid silver. Survivors trickled in, his old crew, her exiled kin, drawn by the broadcast call, their ships dotting the horizon. Jace grinned, waving. "Guess we're popular now." Veyra leaned on him, her side still bleeding, and he guided her to a reflective pool edged with crystal. The others set up camp, voices buzzing with hope, but Jace tuned them out, kneeling with her by the water. "Let's fix you up," he said, peeling the bandage away. Her violet blood stained his hands, and her thoughts brushed his, safe, with him, warm and raw. She grabbed his wrist, pulling him closer, and their eyes locked. "You stayed," she said, voice low, melodic, cutting through the quiet. "Couldn't leave my home behind," he replied, half smiling, half breaking. Her claws slid up his arm, sparking heat, and she tugged him down, the pool's edge cold against his knees. Then she moved, fast, fierce, dragging him into the shallow water with her. It splashed around them, slicking her purple-white skin, and she straddled him, thighs clamping his hips, her weight pinning him under the moon's glow. Her claws dug into his chest, tearing through what was left of his shirt, and his hands gripped her waist, sliding up her slick curves, pressing into the heat of her bare skin where armor gapped. The energy erupted, a cascade of fire and static, racing through him, sharp and wild, coiling low and desperate. Her silver hair fell over his face, wet and soft, and she pressed down harder, hips rocking against his, water sloshing as their pulses synced. His fingers dug deeper, tracing the swell of her hips, and her breath hitched, hot against his lips, inches away. The spark flared brighter, a storm of sensation, her thighs squeezing, her claws raking red lines down his chest. And he groaned, voice wrecked, "Veyra." She answered with a kiss, fierce, unrestrained, her lips crashing into his like a claim. The energy peaked, a blue-white glow pulsing where they touched, illuminating the pool, And he kissed back, hands sliding up her back, pressing her closer. It was raw, victorious, a defiance of every lie that had kept them apart. Her taste sharp and sweet, her body molding into his, the bond a wildfire that burned away the galaxy's chaos. They broke apart, gasping, water dripping between them, and her violet eyes glowed, fierce and soft. "Mine," she said, claws lingering on his chest, marking him. "Yours," he panted, grinning. The sting of her scratches a badge he'd wear forever. She eased off, pulling him up, and they sat there, tangled in the shallows, the camp's hum distant. Days bled into weeks on Vantera. Jace rigged shelters with scavenged tech, joking, king of the junk heap, reporting for duty, as his crew laughed. Veyra led with grace, her kin rebuilding beside humans, their hands crafting a village from crystal and steel. The bond never faded, her thoughts a constant hum in his mind, his in hers, and they moved as one, a rhythm born in blood and fire. One dawn, they climbed a crystal ridge, the plains shimmering gold below. The village thrived, kids ran between tents, human and Zyrathian voices mingling, a new world rising from the ashes. Jace held her hand, claws pricking his skin, and the spark flowed, steady, warm, a promise kept. "Found my crew," he said, voice thick, glancing at her. Messy, loud, perfect. She squeezed his hand, her silver hair catching the light, and her thoughts wrapped around his. "My heart, my tribe." "And I found mine," she replied, leaning into him, her side pressed to his, solid and real. He laughed, soft and free. "Family's a pain, huh?" "Always," she said, smirking, and they stood there, the sky shattering into color above them. Below, a kid waved, a human boy with a Zyrathian girl, giggling as they chased a glowing bug. Jace waved back, his other arm slipping around Veyra's waist, and she let it stay, her warmth an anchor against the breeze. The Velections were gone, scattered, hunted, their lies dust in the wind. The war wasn't over, not fully, but here, on this mirrored plane, it didn't matter. Jace tinkered with a busted panel nearby, muttering about duct tape, while Veyra sharpened her blade, its hum a quiet song. The village sprawled wider every day, and they kept building, together, unbreakable, a spark that lit the dark.